I'm Linda Egnatz, and I'm the Executive Director of the Global Seal of Biliteracy. I'd like to welcome you to Global C.R.E.D. and to this session, Game Changer, how the Seal of Biliteracy engages learners and grows programs. So let's start with the basics. What is the Seal of Biliteracy? It's a recognition awarded to certified language skills in 2 or more languages. But for me, as a language educator of 40 years, it was a way to get students away from seat time. I saw too many students who were taking a language just to meet a college entrance requirement. Students who were gifted, students who were bright, who had language skills, who were heritage learners, and who could really use language in their future. Maybe they were interested in medicine or law enforcement, international business or science. And I saw all of those ways that language would really be a complement to those career fields. And yet they were throwing away the opportunity by just sitting in the seat and meeting a college entrance requirement. And so for me, the Seal of Biliteracy became a game changer. In fact, I wrote an article about that for Education Week in 2014. Today, several years later, I believe that it's even more a game changer than I did then. So what does the Seal of Biliteracy represent? It's a way to provide proof. It's a way for a language learner to articulate their skills to an employer or to an academic institution, that they have skills in 2 languages. While most of the time a Seal of Biliteracy is earned through an external test, most employers have no idea what a test represents or what a test score really means. I had a student once who said when he shared with his employer that he had gotten a 4 on the AP test, his employer said, "Well, that's nice." When he said he was going to get a Seal of Biliteracy, he said, "Wow, you must be really good at languages," and he gave him a raise. In fact, the Seal of Biliteracy is just an incredible way for a student to sort of articulate and describe what they can do. Someone has thought enough of it that they've actually put it on a piece of paper. And documents matter. Credentials matter. In the United States, one of those languages must be English, whether that language is your first or second language. The only exception is the state of Hawaii, because Hawaii is a state with 2 official languages. So there it might be German and Hawaiian. And all of these, in most cases, all of these languages and their measurements are based on the ACTFL proficiency scale. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And in most states, it also is a seal of biliteracy. Now, what that means is that it's not just about being bilingual, in other words, having communicative speaking and listening skills in 2 languages, but it also adds the element of literacy, being able to also read and write in 2 languages. And multilingual or multiliterate would be more than 2 languages. Now, there are exceptions because we also have languages, such as some of our Native American languages, where there isn't a written format, or in some cases, sign language. And so the Seals of Biliteracy are really incredibly important. But I also see them as a way to really gamify language learning, and that engages learners. And so let's kind of talk about it in terms of gaming. So if we think about our players, in a game, a player has that spirit of competition. And sometimes they're just playing against themselves, especially if it's a video gamer. And so it's the idea of a learner taking autonomy over their own pathway to proficiency and their own language learning in order to meet their own goals. They want to shine. They want to be able to have something that they can add to that college application that someone else may not have. It's also a really big paradigm shift. For way too long, students have taken language to meet a college entrance requirement. And oftentimes that was just a 2-year requirement. So there was never any commitment to learning language for language's sake, or for learning language for to become actually proficient in the language. It was just, what do I have to do to get by or to get those 2 credits? And so when someone takes on the Seal of Biliteracy, they're in it for the long haul from the very beginning. They see the sequence as being important, but they also see the learning of the language as being important because there's a test at the end in order to get the seal. Secondly, I think about it as not being a trophy or just an award or a certificate, but really a tool for the future. A Seal of Biliteracy is a micro-credential. It's something they can put on a resume, not under an award or an honor, but actually under a certification is like a plumbing license because it documents an actual usable skill. It may also provide for a tiered certification because in some cases we can benchmark testing. Some states offer multiple tiers of a state seal, and the Global Seal has 3 tiers of language skills represented in their Global Seal certification program. And finally, it's a benefit to academic programs because it grows retention, it grows commitment, and most importantly, it grows excitement and learner engagement. And there's nothing more fun to be as a teacher in a class where students really want to learn and achieve. And so let's talk a little bit about the state seals of biliteracy and what are their game basics. For the most part, the players in the state seal program are seniors in high school. There are some states that allow for a student to earn the seal through testing earlier, but it's generally awarded to a senior at a high school graduation or senior honors program shortly before graduation. What they need to play typically is some kind of either application to the school. Sometimes there's an application by the school made to the State Department of Education. There may be reporting on the behalf of an administrator. There are recognition costs that are paid for by the school districts. The schools must meet the school district or state department's rules or requirements. In most cases, that's requiring some sort of approved or qualified testing. Testing also has costs and expenses associated with that. Sometimes those costs may be borne by the school, sometimes through grants. Title monies may sometimes be applied, especially for English language learners. And lastly, sometimes those tests are actually paid for by students themselves. And there's also the question of recognition and how you're going to document those tests and include that on a transcript and or diploma. And lastly, it's the varied tiers of play. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but each state has determined its own criteria. And those criteria and rules do differ from state to state. The Global Seal of Biliteracy is a little bit different. It was born out of some of the gaps in the state seals. One of those gaps are players. For the Global Seal, it was not just restricted to just seniors in public schools who opted into participation. So initially, oftentimes public schools, students in homeschools, college students, students in dual language programs who may have high levels of proficiency earlier, heritage learners were left out of the equation. And so the Global Seal is actually open to any language learner who would like a language certification. What do you need? You just need those 2 language skills in those 2 or more languages. There isn't a special application to the state. There is an application made to the Global Seal, either as an individual or as a school or organization. And learners can test consistently, but they can test anywhere. They can test with their school. There are options for testing individually through remote proctors as well. And the consistency and the rules and the qualifying tests apply to everyone everywhere. They're the same. Whereas we saw in the states, they may differ. And lastly, there are 3 tiers of play. We have a functional fluency, a working fluency, and a professional fluency level. And students can level up. They can actually begin as young as middle school with the first Global Seal at functional fluency, especially if they're a heritage learner or in a dual language program. and then continue all the way through high school or adulthood and beyond toward working toward their global seals. And so this gives us a little bit of an idea of what that looks like when we graph that out along the ACTFL proficiency scale. And so you'll see below the initials of the states and where their state seal qualifications and criteria lie. Some of these states have more than one criteria. In other words, they have more than one level. Maybe they have a silver and a gold, or a bronze and a platinum. We also have some states that have a test criteria or criteria that may meet that in another way. For example, with seat time, a GPA over a certain number of coursework, or some other determined portfolio district body of evidence. And you'll see those over on the left. And so you'll see that by and large, the majority of the states look at intermediate mid as that requirement to get their state seal of biliteracy. But that's not, but there's also a number of states with intermediate high and several states that do have a second tier at advanced low. And so you'll see above where the global seal might compare to those. So for example, in my state of Illinois, we can actually have students earn an intermediate mid functional fluency state seal, an intermediate high Illinois state seal, an advanced low working fluency global seal. So they can actually, throughout their high school year, earn 3 different language awards. And wouldn't that be impressive on a college application? And so it depends on where you are, what needs, and to me, it's sort of like, how do we best honor the student? So for example, if I'm in an intermediate high state and a student doesn't begin language early, or they don't begin, for example, a character language until high school, that might not be as achievable, and at least they might be able to achieve intermediate mid. So that might be a really good option for them. On the other hand, if a student is a heritage learner, they began maybe in middle school, or they're they're just really strong and love languages, and they exceed the intermediate mid or intermediate high levels, they might actually achieve a working fluency level. We see that a lot for those students. And let's award them a credential at the level that they are, not where maybe perhaps their state seal is. And so there's lots of different ways of looking at it. And my best advice is always to let the student shine at the best place that they can. If you want to learn more about your state seal of biliteracy, on the Global Seals website, theglobalseal.com, there is an extensive bank of state resources as well as research on the state seals of biliteracy. There's an interactive map where you can click on your state. You'll find your state's criteria, some simple information about your state, what the award looks like, what are the common and popular tests that are accepted by your state, as well as a link to your state's law and website information. And so this gives us a look at what the state seal map is. Currently, there are 40 states that have a state seal of biliteracy, although it's not called a state seal in every state. Some call it an endorsement or a certificate in some cases. My neighboring state of Indiana calls it a certificate of multilingualism. So it depends on where you are. In comparison, we see that a similar number of states have issued global seals of biliteracy, 42 states in the District of Columbia, but that the global seal has also been issued in other countries as well. And so what the most important thing about it is that the global seal, the state seal, the seal of biliteracy motivates learners. And we found this out in doing a lot of research, and this research has been replicated as also just in just example after example from school districts. We hear that it works. Students see the value of a language credential. And so in this particular study that was published in the Foreign Language Annals, studying 3 different school districts in Illinois, they interviewed students both in language courses, English language learners, and students not in language learning courses, and asked them about the value of a state seal of biliteracy. with about 80% of the students saw that as beneficial for future work opportunities. In fact, college credit was important, but grades were hardly as important at all. But they really saw it as connecting to future. In fact, one of the quotes from the Spanish 2 student said that he thought it, would help him get a scholarship, and that was his reason for staying on. And so he decided he would continue taking Spanish so he could get a Seal of Biliteracy. And so students really do see it as a long trip journey. And there's a number of reasons why students might want a Seal of Biliteracy. So early admission to universities. So if they have a global seal, for example, which could be awarded prior to the senior year when they're applying to college, it's one way that they might be able to stand out on an application letter. A job resume or a CV, they might want it for advanced placement. There are 5 states that provide automatic college credit for their for a state seal. The global seal also has some college credit opportunities. And it quantifies their skills in a way that an employer or a university can understand. And so these are just some examples of some students who, with their global seal of biliteracy, got some game bonuses. On the left, we see Taylor, and Taylor used her state seal of biliteracy in Spanish to apply for scholarships, to distinguish herself as she was working, applying for internships and working for some non-government organizations. And in doing so, she was also able to continue to expand and improve not just her travel experiences, but also her language skills. Annabella used her 2 global seals, one in Spanish and one in Chinese, to get early admission to Cornell University. Austin used his functional fluency global seal in Spanish to get a scholarship to Michigan State University. And Georgia used her working fluency global seal for Japanese to get advanced placement in college. And so we see students using these skills to leverage opportunities for the future. The seal increases retention. We see this over and over again in different school districts, where if they implement a seal of biliteracy, the students, again, they want that. They see that as adding to their sort of future cred. And so in many cases, in fact, in the documentation that we look at here, within a couple of years, the numbers in the advanced placement programs doubled. And that's a pretty powerful thing to start to look at, especially if you're in a program that is struggling sometimes. And so we see that that's a pretty exciting thing to begin to look at, that within 2 years, your language program numbers might begin to double. I like this quote by the student who said, "It gives you a motive to finish." Before I was like, why am I in this class? And oftentimes that's what students think. This they understand. If a student is in college, they can also get a seal of biliteracy. This is Ana Barajas, who got 2 global seals, one in one in French and one in Italian. And she saw it as a real connection to be able to show an employer that she had not just a language on a transcript, but actual demonstrated proficiency through testing that was ready to go to work for her. And I think that connection that the high school students identified, that Anna in college also identified to work, is really critical. And ACTWL offers this incredible poster called Oral Proficiency Levels in the Workplace. It's free, it's downloadable, or you could buy the printed version if you like. And it helps learners match their fluency level to a job goal. And so it identifies what jobs would be needed at different levels of fluency or different levels of proficiency. So if I'm at functional fluency, then I might find that there is usefulness for that. It isn't like I have to know everything to be able to get a job, but I could work as a receptionist or as a sales clerk. I can do some repetitive tasks that require the same kind of language over and over again. But if I have a little bit more language, I can do that past narrative and say, what happened? How did you get injured? I could work maybe as a nurse and have, a little bit more skill at the advanced low level for working fluency. I could be working as a language teacher, and even a little bit more skill, and I could take it up to that advanced high level and begin to really look at some professional language skills. And so when students begin to connect their skills, that also helps them set goals for themselves as to how hard they want to work to learn a language. One of the unique pieces about the global Seal of Biliteracy is the power of that connection. So we want to kind of change our language to not talk about the Seal of Biliteracy as an award or an honor, although it may be that, but to really just change it from a trophy to a tool to help our students understand how to leverage that tool to articulate their skill set. So rather than list it under an honor or an award, put it under a skill and a certification, and they can do that on a resume or a CV, or right here, for example, on a LinkedIn under skills and certifications. The Global Seal does that very well because it has a unique serial number for each individual certificate. There are also paid differentials available for students that are bilingual and can demonstrate it with a document or through testing. Sometimes they're called foreign language proficiency pay. And one of those that we've noticed, and it's been much in the news lately with COVID, is in the medical profession. And so I looked at ZipRecruiter that said that the average salary for a nurse was around $70,000 in the United States. The American Nursing Association says that there's a pay differential of about 7% nationally, but according to ZipRecruiter, an average bilingual nurse was receiving an average pay of about $85,000. So that's a really big piece, a big difference it pays here to be bilingual. And once again, this is a place where students don't oftentimes see themselves using their language alongside of another career that they may want to pursue. And that's why we need to provide them with that vision early on that language proficiency is worthwhile keeping. The Global Seal of Biliteracy is a benefit to you too as an educator. And we see more and more teachers working to that for a number of reasons. First of all, they have then the experience of their students of testing for proficiency. Secondly, it gives them not just that experience of testing, but it also gives them an awareness of their own skills and maybe that being able to model the idea of improving their own language skills. Oftentimes as a teacher, we've ceased to do the things that got us to the place where we could be a teacher of the language. We've stopped, we're writing sentences as opposed to paragraphs and essays. And we're not using, sophisticated language. We're using something that's a little bit more comprehensible to lower level learners. And we've lost our own edge. And that's unfortunate. And so this gives us some goals to continue modeling language learning for our own students. And so I think that's something else that you can consider as a great goal. And so we think about in the classroom and in our curriculum, how do we align those goals for proficiency outcomes? And we think about those three levels of that novice, the intermediate, and the advanced. And we want to let our students know that they need to think about where are you on this scale? It's your own path to proficiency. And so I want to kind of think about that as an outcome, as that high level of that advanced high, as Julia Zhang, who's a chief engineer with Karma. Well, it's sort of my dream car that I'd really like to have. And so let's think about that in terms of transportation. And so if we come down here at that novice low, our very simple sort of transportation as a baby is we don't have much to do, but everybody gets very excited about whatever it is that we're doing. And then novice mid, everyone's very much excited, but we still have an awful lot of support. But we think we're doing it all by ourselves. And then we get onto that tricycle. Again, there's still lots of support, but we're getting and moving a little bit more independently. When we get into that intermediate space, we truly are more independent. We're a little bit wobbly, but we are on our own. And it takes practice. When we take off those training wheels, we may fall, but we get better. And as the more we practice, the less likely we are to fall. Now, there might be a bump in the road, that unexpected situation that we might still fall over, but we're more likely to achieve. And then we get those, the, that sort of learner's permit to the car. And here we are on our way, almost there to adulthood. And then maybe we get that advanced level. We're really, we have working proficiency. We could be a chauffeur. We could drive the car for real in the workplace. We could use our language. Or like Julia at Advanced High, we could be articulate and bilingual in workspaces with highly technical language in more than one culture and more than one language in more than one place. And so we think about students and setting it out that it is a pathway and that each part of it is viable, and that it's just that it's not that it's a pass or fail or you're not good enough yet. It's just that you're on your way and there's always more to learn. And so if we take that concept and we start to put it into specifics, we can talk about those novice learners and what do they need to do to move out of novice. They need to, it's all about word count. We need to increase their word count. We do that by getting excited. We do that by visual support, helping them see word walls, things like that to help them understand. We want those novice mids. We want to, get them, we need to give them some chunks of language that they can begin to play with. Lots of rote language that they can repeat and get excited about and feel successful, even though they're highly supported. And we want them to start doing what they're going to do next, which is descriptive narrative. But we start with describing who's most important to their world, themselves. And those chunks and those patterns can then be, substituted out later to describe someone else or to describe something else or somewhere else. And we begin to ask those questions and answers, first again with rote memorization, but we build on that and expand. For our novice highs, we're working toward telling stories. And so everything becomes more elaborated and longer. And so we want to begin to think about how do they describe not just themselves, but people, places, things, ideas, all of those make up telling stories. And then our language and our conversations are not just questions and answering, but conversational skills where we respond to a question and we respond to an answer. And then we're creating more organization. So we have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end, we have detail, we have connections. And we create all of those pieces and begin to expand them. For our intermediate lows, we're telling a story. So we've moved away from describing singular things to describing events, where that might have people that have described or have things we describe, but within the context of an event where we can sequence what happened first, what happened next, what was the place like, where did the event take place? And we begin to build on this soon and then begin to start working toward when did the event happen, so we can additionally begin to move toward different time frames. We have to support, sort of that recycling, because this is where you have enough language to just get by. And that's what a lot of language students do. This is where they stall. We also start to think about more sophisticated language, agreeing, disagreeing, supporting opinions. We start to do more academic things with language. And this is the place where they start to being understood by a native speaker and they are thrilled to death. It's where they come to you and say, oh, I talked to someone or I saw something and I understood. And they don't get that excited with you as the teacher, but they do with native speakers. And they need that experience. So that's one of the best gifts you can give to an intermediate is opportunities to interact with native speakers. For our intermediate mids, it's all about practice, 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 practice with native speakers, practice with native text, language texts, authentic resources, and lots of storytelling. Descriptive, event, past, present, future, build endurance, authentic resources. And then most exciting, use language in real ways with real people, project-based learning, all of those kinds of things that begin to connect language to the real world where they will eventually want to use it. Again, the same thing expands into that intermediate high space. But this is, remember, where that they're on the bicycle, they're on the 10 speed, where they start to not being able to deal with the bump in the road. This is that same space. Now we have to help them deal with the bumps in the road. Try the role plays, but throw a little twist, a little curveball. And we start to talk about deep culture. We start to talk about social issues in a way, problem solving, hypotheticals, things that are more complex. Learners need to know their current level. They also need to know that they're not going to be at the same level in every skill. And that we find out through benchmark testing. And they need to know that once they get to that intermediate mid space, the only way they really do continue to use and grow their language skills is to have experiences in the language, using and applying the language. That's when it begins to click and make sense. It truly is like a sport or music. It takes practice. And so there's a lot of value to do benchmark testing, where a student gets actual feedback on their skill set. And you can do that with the Global Seal because there isn't an age requirement. And so if you're looking to do that, begin that testing, some of your students may actually qualify sooner than you would expect. On the website, www.theglobalseal.com, you'll find a testing page under our Learn More tab, and it'll have the list of the tests that qualify for the Global Seal. We have tests in over 100 different languages, and if you click on the test name, you'll be taken to a page that describes that particular test, gives more information, as well as the test link to the test company. The Global Seal does not test, but we will verify the test scores that are provided to us by you or by the test company itself. We can help you find a test in your language. Simply click on our languages page, find the language you're looking for, and you will be taken to a page that will provide you with links to a number of companies that offer a test for that particular language. Again, over 100 different languages. So what do proficiency tests measure? They're going to measure the comprehension of the language, both in listening and in reading, what the learner actually understands, again, according to the ACTFL scale, as well as what can the learner produce? What can they do on their own? How can they create that language? For writing, that would be sentences into paragraphs to essays. For speaking, a conversation or doing a presentation on a topic. And in 2021, the Global Seal will also be taking qualifying tests based on the Council of Europe CEFR exams. So that's something exciting to look forward to. When a student takes a 4-skill test, these can oftentimes provide learners with great feedback, as well as the school district with some good feedback on curriculum, strengths and weaknesses. What's going to surprise the students is that they don't have the same test score in every category. They have strengths and they have weaknesses. And this is where gamification can happen, because oftentimes their best score is 2 sub-levels on that ACTFL scale above their low level. That means by the time they reach intermediate mid in every level, at least one of their scores is probably at advanced low. And the student sees themselves almost at the next level and is likely to think about leveling up and taking one more year of language, or working a little bit harder to bring up that low score level. So it's a pretty exciting piece. Another feature about these individual score reports is many of them give them some diagnostics. What did they do well? And where do they need to improve? Or what can they do to score higher the next time? And you'll notice this sort of gamification piece on your group reports, and I've circled them here. And so what we actually see is that almost everyone has earned the Functional Fluency Award, which would be, in this case, on this Avant Stamp 4S test, a score of 5s. But we also see some of the students in some of the skill sets have even qualified with a score of 7 for our working fluency. And there are a few who actually have a professional fluency score in a couple of categories. And so that's the beauty of a 4-skill test. Students will recognize that they have strengths and weaknesses, and that will give them some areas to work on, but also some areas in which they can celebrate. We see that benchmark testing. If you can test early, then students won't have the experience of waiting till their senior year and finding out that they didn't qualify and won't graduate with a Seal of Biliteracy. Rather, they'll know early on where those weak areas are that they need to improve. Albuquerque found that from one year to the next, 11% of their students leveled up from the Functional Fluency Level Award to the next level award to our working fluency. They went from intermediate mid to advanced low. That's pretty exciting. And we see those numbers just jump. So what makes this game worth playing? As far as I'm concerned, it's an exciting thing to want students want to engage in language learning and improving. And so we want to not just engage students, but we might need to engage administration, parents, and the community. And one of the things that the research discovered was that parents and students felt like they did not find out early enough about the opportunity, that some of them had already dropped out of language after 2 years before they had known about it. And some of the seniors said they didn't even know and hadn't even tested when they could have. And so we want to think about, as an administrator, you want to think about how this program can raise your school profile. It does a number of things for you. First of all, one of the qualifying tests for the Global Seal, as well as state seals, is an AP test. It increases, we said, your AP enrollment. Well, that does some things for you. It can increase your school report card, your college readiness index, the college curriculum breadth index of how many students are prepared for college. Those have impacts on your state school report cards, even have impacts on things like your home values and what realtors say about your communities. It also has an incredible impact on English language learner populations and students that are in underserved populations. And so when we begin to start articulating the benefits, you need to inform all of those stakeholders. You need to talk to counselors about how language is a part of those core courses for Division I NCAA students and athletes. And you can provide information on your school website about the fact that you offer a state or global Seal of Biliteracy program, or both. You want to acknowledge and empower your English language learners because of the college credit or advanced placement options that would be available to them. And oftentimes they have a home language that through testing, they can actually earn competency-based high school language credit for a language not offered at your school. A Bill and Melinda Gates study found that 21% of students in the Washington State study needed those credits to actually graduate. 10% of them needed those credits to get into a 4-year college, and about 1/3 of those students were Spanish heritage students. And so we think about the opportunities for students that take languages and get a Seal of Biliteracy, get those advanced placement credits. The advantages later continue. They can do study abroad. They can earn a minor in 3 semesters. They can get scholarships. They can utilize those for internships, to set themselves apart in interviews for jobs, and in this case, for medical school. There are lots of benefits. The cost savings alone for the advanced placement piece in colleges are huge. Ultimately, a good program needs good promotion. These are just a few of the things to think about on your website, using posters and announcements, not just about the program, but when are the tests, celebrate your successes, have an awards program, put it out on social media. And we provide a lot of these materials for you on the Global Seals website. And we do have the badge that you can put, the text. We offer posters and flyers and all of those kinds of things that will make it easy for you to share your successes and your programs with your family and your stakeholders. Lastly, celebrate what you want to duplicate. Students need to know what it is that you think is important. We believe bilingualism is something worth celebrating. So the process is simple. Your first step is, as a school district, to go to the globalseal.com to apply for your students as a group. You'll apply on behalf of your learners. Once your students have tested, you will submit their names alongside of an electronic copy of their scores. And we will send you completely free of charge their serial numbered, personalized Global Seal certificates and embossed seals. So be the game changer and share the Global Seal opportunity or a Seal of Biliteracy opportunity with a language learner you know. Whatever your age, even as an educator, if you're bilingual, get your cred. Thank you.